Welcome back to another episode of Red Titan. In today's video, the user asked the question, Ex-racist of Reddit, what made you change your mind? And here are all the crazy answers. I went away to college. I was a kid in a racist family, and bombs were thrown around the dinner table regularly. I had really only met a few African Americans in my whole life. I was also the first in my family to go to college, other than my brother to seminar for the cult my family is in, which I don't count. My friend Richard, redacted, was my first black friend. I think he only liked me at first because he had a crush on my friend Amy, and she would always be at my parties. But we ended up friends for 4 years. I'm naturally sort of empathetic and am good at putting myself in other shoes. It just sort of dawned on me very early on that I wouldn't speak or act that way if he was around, so I just decided that I should never act that way. It took me a little while to forgive myself for being garbage, but I was a kid and literally didn't know any better. Oh yeah, and I fired my family. I haven't talked to Rich in over 20 years. I moved 3,000 miles away after college, and as you might expect from his name, it is basically impossible to Google him. If you're out there, Rich, thanks! My grandma grew up in Virginia in the 1900s. Being racist is just the default setting. Nana loved her family more than anything though. So at one point in the late 1980s, she met her first not 100% white grandkid and discovered she still loved him. She made an astounding late life progress accepting that darker skin tone people were not only people, but family, friends, and welcome in our house. I never made the choice really to be racist. But I grew up in South Mississippi, and my family wasn't overtly racist, but they were the kind to say racist things behind closed doors, and didn't allow us to watch TV shows such as The Cosby Show or Fresh Prince, and definitely no rap music in the house. I absolutely fell in love with a lot of black artists in the early 90s. I loved the hip hop scene at the time, and holy shit, Fresh Prince was the best sitcom on television. I played football with 80% black guys and worked at Popeye's Chicken with over half the staff being black. I guess you could say my own real world exposure, despite their attempts to shelter me, changed me. I cringe at some of the vernacular I used in my early youth, as the N-word was the same as black in my house. I literally was not raised to know that was a bad word. I'm glad from the age of maybe 12 on, I learned to love all people on my own. My whole family is quite racist. When I was little, I was trying to wrap my head around the rules of the world. So I thought it was as simple as different teams. Black versus whites was just like the Red Sox versus the Tigers. Then my grandmother starts going on about how horrible Polish people are and how I'm never to talk to them. So I'm psyched! Screw those Polish people, whatever color they are. We're mortal enemies. Then she points out our Polish neighbor to me. But she's white. I point out to my grandmother that she's white, so we're on the same team. My grandmother says no, but that she's a mixed breed. I point out that my great granddad was a Shoshone Indian and that I'm a mixed breed. She says that doesn't count, and that's when I realized she was just making up rules, and I wasn't going to play games with someone who couldn't stick to the rules. My uncle used to be the most racist person I knew, and it drove me crazy. But he is an old white man and set in my ways, is what he would say when confronted. It all changed the day his great-granddaughter was born. His granddaughter had married a black man, and he was unaccepting until the baby was born. She had him wrapped around her pinky finger from her first breath. Since then, there are several mixed children in the family. It's awesome to see the difference in his behavior. He genuinely loves them all and accepts the racially different spouses of his grandchildren and their children. If he hears anyone being racist, he shuts it down. Not myself, but many former racist, or at least now less racist, friends of mine were able to have their minds changed just by simple exposure, especially the non-whites that didn't fit the stereotype. At first, it starts that they are just one of the good ones, but after a while, when they meet enough good ones, they start to realize that the good outnumber the bad, and their racial worldviews start to crack. Doesn't work on them all though. Some are racist due to education and esteem issues, but many are racist simply from the lack of exposure to other races, only having what the media/environment they live in tell them to fill in that gap. A guy I worked with said he was a neo-Nazi as a teenager and ended up in prison somehow. He hated Jews for some reason, and blacks. He was never clear on why, just that he had so much hatred in his heart, and that was his outlet. He was in prison for many years. I think he almost killed someone by beating them up. So many years later, and in prison, there was a mentor type staff there, and this one lady was so helpful to him, and she cared about him so much that it really started to get into his head the idea of being a positive person. Then he learned that she was Jewish, and he said he couldn't believe she was so kind and caring, despite the fact he was a claimed neo-Nazi. From that day, he swore to be a better person. He learned his lesson. He's a pretty great guy these days, doing his family thing and making sure his son grows up with lots of love and all that he didn't have. Really remarkable. Great guy. Short answer, rap music and a curious mind. But what's more impressive is how thick of a shell it cracked. My stepfather, who pretty much raised me, was/is a Klansman, and so is his father, brothers, etc. This was an old-fashioned family too. My mother didn't speak unless spoken to. My sisters were expected to marry who my stepfather chose. This was normal to us. I was expecting to find a woman to marry and start a family as soon as I was 18. I'm 23 now, so this was recent. My stepfather beat my oldest sister black and blue for sleeping with a black man. He always told us that black people are rapists and gangbangers, and that Mexican, while hard workers, are all dirty people and would never amount to anything useful aside from cheap labor. He controlled what we watched and played to reinforce his beliefs in us. On top of this, he was a devout Christian. I was a closeted atheist at 16, but he would have literally killed me if he knew. He believed that gay people should be killed alongside of the atheists and Muslims. He wasn't focused on Jews for whatever reason. I never met a person of color until I was 17, so I never experienced anything firsthand that contradicts what I was told. Sometime in my late teens, I discovered rap and was obsessed. First song I heard was by Tupac, and I was obsessed. Well, as I learned more, it led me to Martin Luther King Jr. and what he did for people of color. At some point, I broke down crying because I realized everything I was told was a lie. When I realized I was an atheist, I decided I couldn't operate under my old mindset, so I needed something to replace it and decided to go with the speech that broke my hatred. I decided I would judge everyone based on their actions, not the color of their skin or who they prefer to sleep with. Good case could be made that I was racist as a kid, when I was raised by and surrounded by racists for my entire childhood. Stopped pretty quick when I joined the army, since I got out of that small hole southern town echo chamber, an experience we were all equally shitty in my Uncle Sam eyes. Watched another recruit get FTA'd for calling another recruit the N-word. Witnessed a drill sergeant yank 2 recruits out and smoked the out of them for flashy gang signs. And just generally got the idea that racism and tribalism was incohesive and destructive. Didn't fully stop for a while longer though. Took decades to quit hearing my dad or mom in my head when I saw a black guy go down the street going, "Watch out for that N." Is pervasive about being the first thing that pop up on reflex in your head. Squash it the next, but it was still the first for a while. My parents. When I was a kid, both of my parents were in grad school and extremely busy. So my paternal grandmother spent a lot of time taking care of me. Unbeknownst to my parents, she filled my head with racist stuff about how I shouldn't be friends with blacks or Latinos. Just stick to befriending the other Indian kids, though whites were acceptable too. One day, I said something about black people that caught my parents off guard. I don't remember what, but my parents asked me where I had learned that, and I told them. They talked to her, and she never really changed her ways. This ultimately led to my parents no longer letting my grandmother live with us or be around my siblings and I without their supervision, because they couldn't allow such a negative influence helping to raise us. My parents talked to me about what my grandmother told me was wrong. It didn't take too much to get me back to being a normal, non-racist person, because I generally liked many of the black and Latino kids in my class. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you did, please like the video, subscribe for more content coming soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.